Hola tribe. Welcome to the House of Kai. I am Kaidim. I have been sitting in many questions, many truths, and witnessing many illusions. And I've had many discussions with people revealing truths and seeing through illusions. And I will do my best to approach this with questions. I believe the most powerful thing you can do for any human being is give them choice. And in order to give choice, one must have information. First and foremost, always be cautious of those who only feed you one level of information. Be open to living in the question. For the longer you sit in question, the more the truth will rise. The difficulty is that it can make us uncomfortable. And we are creatures of comfort, right? We don't like being uncomfortable. We have many things around us that can create distractions. We like our distractions. Now is not the time to be distracted. Now is the time to question everything. I am asking of self, where do I begin? Many beings were lost during this process because the waters became impure. The sacred waters of life became impure. And those that were of great power within universal energy, there were beings that, for the simplest of terms, sold out. And they chose to feed. For the simplest of terms, I'll say the dark forces or the oppressors, right? Understanding that your life force energy is the most precious gift that has ever been gifted to you, right? The breath of life, right? When God breathed into our bodies, He made us holy, one with all things. The essence of our beings, our waters, were pure. And as I mentioned, there were those that were set forth to keep those waters pure. Sadly, some did not keep up with their contract. And so many came together to purify the waters. There has been a holy battle. However, we have claimed them. And we now have the free will. Right? It is up to each one of us that hold those sacred holy waters within us, the most cherished of light within us, to keep it pure, to not allow distortions or lower vibrational things such as shame and guilt to poison or weigh us down. And those that work for the oppressor or those of the oppressor, that's how they survive. Those that are no longer plugged into the pure essence of light, into this earthly grid, into the grid within our bodies, into the sacred geometry to which resides within us. Those that do not own and are plugged in to that essence are starving. They are starving. For once they were plugged in, they were allowed in and they poisoned the people. They were one with the people and they were sucking the energy out. They were getting feed as well as stealing from beings. They are no longer plugged in. Which is why things are unraveling the way they have. In order for the oppressors, the darker forces, right? At one point in time, I called them the opposition. I no longer see them as opposition. We won. So, they are now only here to oppress people and to weaken them. How does this work? So I'm going to try to first and foremost, forgive me. I don't always remember the correct word that is being utilized, so I will do my best. There is much talk these days of sex trafficking as well as the stealing of babies and children. And regardless of what you know or don't know, the most basic piece of that is that when a being, especially a child, or I would even say a virgin, right? One who is pure and untainted, their hormones or adrenaline has a level of healing power to it. It has nourishment to beings who consume it. And so I have seen and heard different stories of what they're doing is bringing children to the highest states of fear that they could possibly conjure and then killing them. And when they do so, they actually take of the adrenaline that was released in the being's body and consume it. That is one way. It is one way of stealing life force energy from a being. Sadly, it's most likely the purest way. Another way is creating emotion and adrenaline within a human being, creating a fight or flight response, creating an emotional response within a person. How does this take place? When one attempts to shame or guilt you, when they use phrases and comments to stab at you, to get a reaction out of you, they're trying to weaken you. So when somebody says something to you as simply as you should feel ashamed of yourself, that is a huge red flag. Huge. Sadly, there are those who say that phrase, or they say, oh, that's a shame, or you should feel ashamed. That is definitely an old school term. I know many that still say that, and when they do say that, and I know they don't mean to project shame, I know they're saying it because they merely have been programmed to use that phrase. So when they say that phrase to me, I respond with, it's unfortunate. When they say that that's a shame or that's shameful, so no, it's unfortunate. When a human being comments to me saying that I should feel ashamed of something, or attempts to create a shameful response in my body, my being, my spirit, or attempt to make me feel guilty for something that has no truth, right? They're working on manipulating my emotions in order to get me to have an adrenaline release so that they can plug into my body and then pull energy out of the body. This may seem far-fetched for some. However, I have witnessed those of the dark forces literally plugging into people's kidneys, right? I specifically remember being at a funeral and witnessing a woman who, well, let's just say she didn't like me much. And I watched and witnessed as she went around the circle of women and pretended as if she cared for people. She put up a great face of pretending, she had an established title within the family, so people thought she was of some level of importance. She didn't care. She didn't care about how people were feeling. She showed no emotional response in her body of actually caring. She just said a few comments that may or may not have gotten people to believe that she cared. What she did do is stand next to people and place her hand behind their backs, right around the kidneys. She wasn't touching them half the time. Majority of the time, she just stood there with her hand behind them. And I'm well versed in energy. And I watched as she pulled energy out of people's kidneys as if she attached a hose or a connection to them. Her energy force got bigger and their energy force got more depleted. They, in fact, probably thought it was normal because they were having an emotional response and they already were feeling weakened, right? So what's more drainage, they didn't notice the difference. She, in fact, got a huge energy boost. Until, of course, I acknowledged it. And she was forced to unplug. This is happening all the time. There are people who are constantly plugging into others' adrenals and kidneys. They're doing it through, one, you may already have a weakness there. Two, they are literally emotionally manipulating you or attempting to draw you out, drain you slowly, right? Manipulate your emotions, pretend. You know, I know of another being that I've witnessed recently that she is pretending to be unintelligent. Like she needs a lot of help. It's a game. I can see the game. She doesn't need help. Well, I mean, she needs help, but not the form to which she's stealing from people. So she is creating an energy between two people. She's forcing conversations. She's speaking in such a way that exhausts you, right? She opens her mouth and you're exhausted just being in her presence. And it's like a leech. She's attaching herself to you and sucking energy out of you. Or at least she attempts to, unless you have enough consciousness around it to not allow it, which in fact she can't even look in my eyes because she knows that I know. So why do I share this? It is time to be cautious. It is time to pay attention to the conversations you're having. There are those beings out there right now that may have been your closest, nearest, and dearest that are no longer showing up that way. There are others you're used to it, right? So many of us are simply used to being abused. We're used to being shamed. We're used to being blamed, right? We're just used to it. We're so used to it that we accept it over and over again and just feel weakened and depleted, and just have accepted that to be normal. It's not normal. If you are plugged in to the Christ light within you, right? The light that was given to you as your birthright. You are a child of the Creator, right? The part of me that almost wants to go into biblical scripture here and at the same time resisting it, I will speak it anyway. For I have no attachments to any religion. I am not attached to a religion. I am connected to the light. And I accept no lower vibrations. And I protect and guard my light at all costs, refusing to allow others to harm it, to damage it, to steal it. Right? Pay attention. Pay attention to the conversations you're having and notice how you feel. If you're walking away from a situation where you're feeling more exhausted than you went in, there are a few different things. One, review it. Review what took place and allow yourself to see if that person was intentionally wishing you the feeling of guilt or shame. As I said, there are some out there that say certain phrases that they're just running a program. Is it okay? Temporarily. That won't be okay for long. That program needs to go. Shame and guilt do not reside where the Christ light is. That's it. However, if you review that story and realize that that's what they've been doing, where usually it's one trigger, they come in, they trigger your emotions, they make you feel weak for a second. What happens is the second they say it, say they remind you of a painful story, or they make a joke about you that they know will make you feel shameful about yourself, right? Whatever that is. Once they do that and you receive that as a hit, or you receive that that attack, you allow it to absorb into your energy field. The second they do that, they found a weakness inside of you, and what they do is they grab it. They grab a hold. It's like they plug into you, and then they leave that plug there, and you can't feel that plug, right? Because a leech literally puts a poison out into its host. So a leech literally will put poison into a host in order to numb the host from knowing the leech is attached to it. And it'll leave the person a little foggy, right? They get a little messed up in the conversation, they get a little lost, or they don't understand why they can't follow the conversation the way they once had. That'll happen. So as this being attaches their energy into you to suck your life force energy, they are now holding that trigger, right? So they'll just continue the conversation like that never happened. They'll just start talking to you and letting that conversation play out as it will, and then all of a sudden they'll poke you again. They'll say something to remind you of the wound that they had already opened up. And when they do that, what it does is it brings your psyche, it brings you back to the emotional trigger. You feel that shameful or guilty emotion, and they get a dose of your adrenaline, right? They get a dose of the energy they're looking for. You're giving them direct feed into their being. So some of our greatest weak spots in the body is where the adrenaline resides. On the regular, right, the kidney region, lower back, right underneath the ribs. So it is very important to clear off that back area on a daily basis. Just swipe it around, warm it up, move things around. Make sure you don't feel too much stagnation back there. And then if you're a person who concaves their chest a whole lot or hunches a whole lot, you're actually, in fact, exposing the kidney region. And so you want to make sure that tension gets out of there. It's very important to start to stand up taller and protect those kidneys. Another region is the knees and the throat, right? So the fight or flight response will, how can I say this? The adrenaline rush that takes place in a fight or flight response will lock into the throat, will lock into the knees. It's a quick throw into the body. And it's like you lose your breath, you lose your balance. And so these are the areas you want to look at. If you're having any throat issues, clavicle things going on through here, you want to really work on unlocking all of this, softening it, getting the pain out of your body, because you could still have something attached to you. They do not have to be in your presence any longer to have an attachment. And if it's a person that you've known for a long time, they might just leave a plug in you, so they always have a way of grabbing and grabbing and grabbing, right? So going home, doing your clearing work or wherever, get it off of you. It's really good. It's in, I know they do this in like different Tai Chi and Chinese medicines, is tapping your body and wiping it down, right? Removing negative chi from your body. Notice where you're storing it. Notice where the weak spots are, or where the denser spots are in the body, and get them open and unlocked, right? Your breath will be imperative at this point in time. In order to remove those denser blockages, you're almost going to feel breathless. You're almost going to want to hold your breath, because if you breathed into that moment in time, you're actually going to experience a bunch of emotions that you are resisting experiencing. So it's imperative to breathe during those moments so that you can actually get it off of you. Your breath is the cure for everything, actually. Yeah. We're in a precarious time. Isn't it interesting they want to take our breath from us? Right? Isn't it interesting? So many things to say. The most oppressive thing that any human being can go through is lack of breath. There are protests all over right now because of a human being that spoke of lack of breath. Isn't that interesting? Do whatever you can to create the most powerful breath within your being at all times that you are capable. Clear your system. There's an air pattern that moves around our bodies. And wearing a mask only stops you from owning your air pattern. It allows other energies to penetrate through your aura, through your being, right? If that air pattern isn't spinning at an optimum rate, you are weakened and depleted. And you can see it in people before this mask wearing, right? You can see people who lack ability to breathe and always seem like they have people attaching to them and sucking energy from them, right? Depleted all the time. I ask of you, this is a big ask. Be open to the free will of people. Be open to the free will of people. There are people out there that have enough sense and realization to know that the masks are an issue. The masks are a game. They're a way of distracting people. They're a way of stopping people from connecting, communicating, from bonding, right? From sharing energy. They're a way of weakening you. If you don't have enough O2 to your brain, you become weak fast. And you're susceptible to easy programming. And all programming is repetitive speech, right? What are people hearing all the time? What repetitive speech are you listening to all the time? What program are you drinking in? I was recently in the supermarket listening as over the loudspeaker they so playfully asked people to please keep their social distancing and put on a mask. As if, aren't I being well behaved and I'm supporting society and look at me, do. That recording's not going to be playful forever. Eventually it'll sound just as drone-like as the people who conform to it. Speak out. If you are forced to wear one, find a situation where you're unforced, or at least do the work after having worn one to correct the injury that it is doing to the body, to the brain, and to the spirit. Those of the dark forces want us to be weak, and they want us to be at civil war. If we are at war with one another, then we are weakened. Easy to herd people or sheep. Easy to program. Be cautious of what you're fighting for. Are you fighting for the same limitations that the system has already created, a broken system already created? Or are you fighting to break the system? I implore you to do the work, to sit in the uncomfortable energies and ask the questions to your heart, not your mind, to your heart of what truth is. There is so many different pieces of information being told, right? 1 minute it's a virus, next minute it's a bacteria. 1 minute it's a contagious virus, right? But we're still allowed to go to certain places and it's not contagious there, right? Many people being told that you can actually catch a virus. You can't catch a virus. A virus lives within the body already. It's exposed. You know, I spoke to someone earlier today. He said, in all of my years of doing holistic health, the majority of what I heard from people is how angry they were at the medical profession, right? How they were just a number and no cures were being found, no answers. They were just giving more medication, being pacified, shuffled off, that they were never cured or their issue was never taken care of when they went to the medical professionals, right? Some sought alternative care, some found cures in alternative cares, others just sat in the, goodness me, it's a visual I see when people sitting in their shit. A baby just in their poop, right? instead of actually seeking and realizing there was something outside of the box of information that they were fed, instead of actually seeking something beyond that other than the what was common, right? They just sat in the victimhood. And then there are those that chose not to be in victimhood and grew beyond that and sought alternative care and did whatever it took to heal their bodies. What I find so interesting is right now, so many beings already were opposed to the medical system. But now they believe them. Now their word is holy. I keep asking the question, why are you afraid to die? Why are you afraid to die? The majority of people were afraid to live and weren't even living, so they're perfectly contented living in quarantine, right? Minimum life. What's the fear of death? I mean, we all know it's inevitable, right? What are we so afraid of? You afraid of actually taking care of your body? Being accountable for your well-being? Are you afraid of the energy that you'll meet after passing? You know, if you're truly afraid of meeting the Creator, then you might want to correct all those wrongs against the Creator now. It's funny. Years ago, I was in the process of selling a business, and the woman who was intended to buy my business decided to sneak in, kind of thing, right? I did all this work for her, negotiated for her, gave her all the information of how to run the business, how I would expand the business, layers and layers of stuff. I negotiated her rent, got all these great things. I said, if you're gonna buy the business, great, I will sell you the business and I'll give you all this extra help with it. But if you don't want to buy the business, I'll even hold the property off for you. I said, I'm not gonna do anything else for you. I'll let them know that you're interested in this property so that it doesn't go to anyone else, and I'll make sure it's yours, but I'm not going to do anything else for you, right? I gave them like 3 different options of how to move forward with integrity. Instead, what they decided to do is use me to gain all the access they wanted, and right at the end decide that they weren't going to buy the business, but that they could keep the property and all the negotiations and all the advice and everything else and not pay me a penny. And so when I sat in that night, I kept hearing this phrase that they were playing hide and seek, right? Peekaboo. I asked them, I said, why are you playing hide and seek? What is this game you're playing? Why are you playing hide and seek? I have to laugh because, she took all of her clothes off. She stripped down to her underwear, stood in front of me,
'em, 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 'em,
And the only thought I had was, I didn't know God couldn't see through clothes. If your fear around COVID is over death, then you may want to check in with the life you've lived. Because God always knows where you're hiding. I hope some of this information supports you. I hope some of this information awakens others. Regardless, I love you. And I pray that all of the Creator's children come home. Till next time.